You know how two people can quarrel, and in the heat of the moment, all kinds of things are said. Some of it is nonsense, some of it is anger, some of it is pure emotion. But every now and then, buried somewhere in the shouting, a truth slip out. A truth nobody was planning to say it aloud. A truth that exposes a crack. And friends, I think that is exactly what has happened in the recent exchanges between South Africans and the rest of Africa. What started as arguments about jobs, immigration, foreign companies, and economic hardship has accidentally exposed something much deeper: a crack. A crack that many Africans have ignored for years. Sometimes storm does not create the weakness, it simply reveals where the foundation was already broken. Shout out to my pastor. And among all the arguments flying around, four exchanges caught my attention, and we will delve into it. The first one, some South Africans said, instead of blaming us, go back and fix your country. Then some Ghanaians replied, well, if we are going to fix our economy, perhaps we should stop renewing some of these mining contracts and maybe even show some companies like MTN the exit door. The response came quickly. Some South Africans fired back, saying, hold on, hold on, hold on. We, the South Africans, go across Africa and build companies, create jobs, and establish businesses. What many other Africans do is come to South Africa looking for opportunities and competing for jobs. And then came the argument that made me stop and think, really? Some Ghanaians responded, and this is it, if South Africa has companies operating all across Africa and beyond, then why are some South Africans saying they are suffering? Why is unemployment such a big issue? Why is there so much anger about foreigners taking opportunities? Now, whether Goldfield, MTN, and other South African companies are helping Ghana more than they are taking from Ghana is a conversation for another day. In fact, that will be the focus of my next video. We will follow the money, we will follow the numbers, and we will separate emotions from fact and know which one is actually benefiting us. But today's conversation is different, because hidden inside those two last arguments is a crack that many Africans have overlooked for years. And we will look into that. And once you see it, you may begin to understand why this conversation is much bigger than immigration. So let us begin with a question. Why are South Africans exporting multinational corporations whilst many other Africans are exporting small traders? Think about it carefully. When South African business arrive in many African countries, they arrive as giants. Think of MTN, think of MultiChoice, think of Stanbic, think of Goldfield, ShopRite, large corporations. They arrive with executive boards, engineers, lawyers, entire corporate structures. But when many other Africans move across borders, the picture often looks very different. A small trader, a barber, food vendor, small shop owner. And now, before somebody misunderstands me, there is absolutely nothing wrong with honest work. Nothing. A trader is not less important than a CEO. A mechanic is not less valuable than an executive. That is not the point. The point is the gap, the skill, and the difference. And that should cause us to think. Why does one side seem to be exporting corporations whilst the other side appears to be exporting survival? This is the question that clearly caught my attention. And friends, if we are honest, that question should make us all uncomfortable, because it forces us to ask deeper questions about our economies. What kind of systems are producing these outcomes? What kind of education systems are we running? Friends, what kind of industrial policies are we building? What kind of businesses are we helping to grow? Why are some countries producing continental champions whilst others struggle to build companies that survive beyond their own borders? Now let us move to another crack, perhaps an even bigger one. If South Africa is producing all these multinational corporations, if South Africa hosts some of Africa's biggest companies, if South Africa has one of the most sophisticated financial sectors on the continent, if South Africa attracts foreign investment, if South Africa has world-class infrastructure in many areas, then why are ordinary South Africans screaming so loudly? Because if I walk into a beautiful mansion, my first assumption is that the people living inside are comfortable. So why are so many people inside this mansion telling us they are suffering? Why are so many young people unemployed? Why are so many frustrated? Why is there so much anger? Why is there so much resentment? Why does a country that appears wealthy from the outside have so many people who feel excluded from that wealth? Friends, this is where the conversation becomes even more uncomfortable, because there's a common denominator running through much of Africa. Common denominator. The people who came here to extract wealth have physically left, but many of the systems they built never left. Many of the structures remain. Many of the economic arrangements remain. Many of the ownership patterns remain. Many of the power structures remain. And in some places, corruption helped protect those systems long after colonial flags came down. The flags changed. Yeah, we changed flags, we changed anthems, we changed all of that. But the structure remained. The economic arrangement remained. And when that happens for decades, eventually people begin moving, because the system no longer favors anybody. Because human beings are survivors. Human beings move toward opportunities always. That is not an African thing. That is human thing. If I should remind you, centuries ago, Europeans crossed oceans looking for opportunities. Many did not even know exactly where they were going. They simply knew survival required movement. Today, millions of people across the world are doing exactly the same thing. They move where opportunity appears to exist, which brings us back to South Africa. The same system that's reduced you to surviving on crumbs brings in others, people from other places, also displaced by the same forces, and they too end up where you are, fighting for the same limited opportunities. Now the frustration sharpens, but it does not go upwards. It turns sideways. Not towards those who control the mansion, but towards those standing beside you. Two groups, both displaced, both struggling, both surviving in the same boys' quarters. And the tragedy is this: while everyone is fighting over crumbs, the question that remains untouched is still the same: who truly owns the mansion? That is the question South Africans must be asking. Let me return to reality. Look around South Africa today. Why is land ownership still such an emotional issue? Why does economic ownership remain such a powerful debate? Why are unemployment figures still among the highest in the world? Could it be that many people feel political freedom arrived, but economic freedom never did? Could it be that many people look at economy and feel disconnected from it? Could it be that the frustration we see is not simply about immigration, but about something much deeper? These are uncomfortable questions, but uncomfortable questions are often the beginning of wisdom. And this is where I think many Africans outside South Africa make a mistake. We see the highways, we see the skyscrapers, we see the shopping malls, we see the corporation, we see the banks, we see the airports, and we assume everybody is thriving. But a beautiful house can hide a lot of pain. A beautiful suit can hide a lot of struggle. A beautiful economy can hide deep inequality. And perhaps that is one of the wounds we have failed to understand. Not excuse, understand. There's a difference, because understanding pain is not the same thing as justifying bad behavior. We can condemn attacks on fellow Africans while still asking what pain is producing the anger. Now, having said that, does historical pain excuse wrongdoing? No. Economic hardship does not justify violence. Frustration does not justify attacking innocent people. At first, I was tempted to say this was just few criminals and troublemakers. But the longer it continues, the harder that explanation becomes. That's it. The South African president says violence is unacceptable, yet people are still watching attacks on food. There are allegations that in some cases people have been attacked even in the presence of law enforcement. And when some South African leaders criticize Ghana for taking the matter to the African Union, it begins to feel like something deeper is at work, a national trauma, a wound that never fully healed. But whatever the wound is, there is no excuse for burning homes, destroying businesses, assaulting people, or killing innocent Africans. And perhaps that is why I find this conversation so important, because if one room in the African house is burning, eventually the entire house becomes unsafe. And at the end of the day, I do not believe Africans should be fighting over crumbs. The bigger question is why so many of us are still fighting over crumbs in the first place. Because if the mansion truly belongs to the family, then the goal should never be ownership of the crumbs. The goal should be ownership of the mansion itself. And perhaps when that day comes, welcoming your brothers will no longer feel like a burden. It will feel like a family. Friends, we will pause here for today, but the bigger conversation continues. If what we are witnessing is the symptom of a deeper wound, then what should Africa do? Can Pan-Africanism succeed if one of the continent's most important nations is still wrestling with unresolved economic and historic wounds? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this discussion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you will know when the next conversation goes live. Until then, stay informed, stay thoughtful, and stay curious. I am Mami Soma. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.